Today, we're going to learn about color theory and do the very basics. We're going to learn how to paint the color wheel using only 3 colors. Today, your materials that you're going to need is a surface of some sort to paint on, paper, cardboard, even a canvas if you'd like. A paper palette. This is actually just a lot like wax paper. You can use wax paper. You can use a plastic plate or a paper plate, or even a fancy palette if you want, but you don't need one. Some sort of cup for water and a paintbrush or two. I've already started by tracing a dinner plate, and then around my dinner plate, I made 12 circles. I started with 3 circles that are equal distance from each other. I made some smaller circles, 3 smaller circles in between those, and then in between those holes, I made some slightly smaller circles. We're going to start by painting using our primary colors. Often you hear the primary colors as red, yellow, and blue. And while that may be true with pure color theory, it doesn't always work so well when we're mixing paint. Your colors can look fairly dull if your blue or red are very, very dark in tone. So what I'm going to start with today is a plain old yellow. You don't have to use fancy paint. Some magenta paint. Again, this is student quality. You don't need to go crazy. And cyan, something in the lighter bright blue. Don't want pastel blue though. So I'm going to put a little bit of each of these colors on my mixing palette. If you've ever looked carefully at printer toner cartridges, you'll also notice that these are the same colors used in color printers. There's a reason why. They mix together really well. So I'm going to take a brush and I'm going to paint in these 3 largest circles, starting with my primary colors. Now, going to wash my brush off, and we're going to start to mix our secondary colors. Secondary colors happen when you mix one primary with another primary color. So 1 plus 1 equals 2. I'm going to mix my yellow with my magenta. What do you think we're going to get? Let's take a look. I already have some mixed right here, so I'm going to use those together. Because yellow is a much lighter color than magenta, I'm going to take some yellow first and then gradually add a little bit of magenta at a time. Mixing them all together right away is usually how we get frustrated with our color mixing. So I believe that this right here is a pretty acceptable orange tone, which is one of our secondary colors. So I'm going to pop that right here in between my magenta and my yellow, and wash off my brush. Now we're going to see what happens. We're going to go right around the circle. We'll see what happens when we mix magenta and cyan. So looking at magenta and cyan, I think they're fairly equal in tone from the colors that I have here. So I'm just going to arbitrarily choose to start with magenta and add a little bit of cyan at a time until I find the midpoint between them. And actually this worked pretty well the first time, I think. And our second secondary color that we're going to add is purple. So orange and purple. Can you guess the third secondary color that we're going to mix? It's going to happen when we mix yellow and cyan together. So let's see. I'm going to take my yellow first again and make sure that I'm starting little by little. Because yellow is such a light color, we want to make sure that we are not overwhelming it with too much at a time. We're seeing some green emerge. Did you guess green? And I think this is a pretty excellent secondary green. And we're going to put it right here. So this might be the extent of the colors that you've experienced when you've learned how to mix colors, but we can definitely go further. we have our primary colors, yellow, magenta, and cyan painted, and our secondary colors, orange, purple, and green. We can push this and have a lot more fun with it. So I'm going to start going the other direction because we're going to paint my favorite color. My favorite color is chartreuse. And since I already have some green on my brush, chartreuse is what happens when you mix green and yellow together. So we get a lovely, bright, springy, yellowy green. So the idea is we're going to add just a tiny bit of green to the yellow, or a teeny tiny bit of cyan, if you don't have your green mixed already. And what you get is this intermediate color before we get to yellow. These colors are sometimes called intermediate colors, and they're sometimes called tertiary colors, but they mean the same thing. Now, the color in between my green and cyan is another tertiary color. And I'm going to add some cyan to the side of my green, and then I'm going to add green to it. Because I've already done some mixing, I don't want to do twice the work. I'm going to add a little bit more blue or cyan until it starts to look the way I'd like it to. Just a bit more, and there we have quite a lovely turquoise to go in my tertiary color here. Some people call it teal, but you can call it turquoise, teal, aquamarine, whatever you like. So we are filling this color wheel up pretty well now. Let's see what happens when we mix cyan and purple. Since we already have our purple mixed, let's add some cyan to our purple. Just gradually, a little at a time. Take a little more. This color, of course, can have many names. There's many names for color as there are stars in the sky. So everybody perceives them slightly differently. But I like to call this one indigo, somewhere in between purple and cyan. Next, we're going to go to what happens when we mix our magenta and our purple. And we've run into a bit of a tricky thing with our naming because since I'm not using something technically called red, we're actually mixing magenta now. So the idea is you're mixing purple and adding more red to it. So this is going to be a tiny bit of blue, but then mostly red. And we're just going to call it magenta, even though that's still less, it's still more purple than I want it to be. Let me mix a little more. Sometimes it's a little trial and error when you're mixing color. There we go. That's somewhere in between, I think. And now we only have a couple more to go. And we've really not had to mix new colors too much because we started with our primary colors and then we just built upon them. Now we're going to see what happens when we mix orange and magenta. So I have my orange already made and I'm just going to add a bit of it, bit by bit. Whoa, that's a lovely sunset kind of color. I'm going to call this one coral. A beautiful coral, orangey red. There we go. And now we only have one left. And this is what happens when you mix yellow and orange. So I'm going to actually take yellow separately. Again, it's so light. We really want to be careful. A little goes a long way when you mix something with yellow. I'm going to take just a little bit of this and mix it in. And I call this color amber, but again, it can have lots of different names. It's an orangey yellow color of the stone amber. It's quite lovely. And if you've done this correctly, you'll see a gradual change through all of these circles. We can get even more complicated with this color wheel by using light and dark versions of each color to show how you'll shade, but that's for another lesson. I hope you'll try this. You only need 3 colors to make everything you see here, and then you can paint a full-on rainbow. I hope you have fun with color mixing, and I will give you another challenge next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.